having a system makes you much more empowered, and
Mm.
your choices and decisions much more powerful and straightforward. So the six noble virtues are about cultivating those positive attitudes in your mind. So a virtue, as you probably know, is a behavior or a thinking pattern that not only benefits other people and yourself, but also ennobles you. So makes you a better person as you
Mm.
practice it. Okay, so it's like an exercise for the soul where you can become a better person, a better version of yourself. So not necessarily a better person in terms of human outlook on it, because sometimes, say, being loyal to certain things or practicing self-control may annoy some people. So
Mm.
they may get angry. But in the universal scope of things, from the universal perspective, you practicing these virtues and you growing those values, those qualities in yourself, makes you a stronger person and more aligned with your purpose. Because I will repeat this because it's quite important. Most people don't understand this. When they talk about purpose, they automatically think about the career path, which is not true. If a career path was someone's purpose, imagine how happy everyone would be. And yet, there are so many people out there doing, let's say, their perfect quote unquote jobs that they wanted to do, jobs that are well paid, and giving them all this career growth, whatever, and feeling acutely miserable and unhappy. So your career path can be an expression of your purpose.
Mm.
Not necessarily, but it can be. But your purpose as a person, and everyone else's in this world, we have one shared purpose that everyone expresses in their own way. Namely, our purpose is to become the greatest versions of ourselves. And if you look around in nature, every living being has the same purpose. Look how everything around you evolves.
Mm.
How every flower tries to be the best flower it can be. Every tree, every bird, every tiger, anything you can think of always strives to become the best, the most powerful, magnificent
Mm.
version of themselves. And as it actually eludes me how humans who are supposed to be thinking beings and
Mm.
intelligent beings cannot grasp that, because it's so obvious, right? So everything in nature follows this pattern, meaning that we are part of nature, and so we also follow this pattern, which just expresses differently. Because for a bird or for a tiger, let's say, it's quite obvious what they need to do or what features they need to develop to become the best version of of themselves.
Yeah.
But for a human, it's a bit less straightforward, although we also have those guidelines. And these are one of these guidelines. So you living your purpose means you becoming your best version, your strongest version, and then radiating that power into the world, sharing it with others, uplifting others. So the six noble virtues, the qualities that you want to cultivate in yourself, because if you think of the five fundamentals,
Mm.
these are the things that create your blueprint for making decisions per se,
Mm.
right? So if you're confronted with a decision, you can solve those points and
Mm.
see where they lead you. Whereas the noble virtues are about developing certain qualities within yourself. So even if you're not making any decisions, you just grow those qualities in yourself. And these are personal dignity, which is one of the most important things, if not
Mm.
the most important. Someone who doesn't have personal dignity would not be able to essentially live their purpose, because no personal dignity or not enough personal dignity means that you don't allow enough power of the universe,
Mm.
enough light to flow into you. So you literally you block that flow of power that tries to access you, and you just don't have enough fuel to move forward. So this is what keeps people trapped. This is why personal dignity is so important. Now, loyalty obviously is your personal choice, and as it's explained in the Codex, you need to be loyal to something that matters. And I would say the best first choice would be to be loyal to your truth, because from that, everything else comes out. You may remember in the Codex, it explained how you have betrayal of others, betrayal of self. And if you remember, betrayal of self is actually a worse, say, sin or error than betrayal of others. This is because if you betray someone else, which is obviously really bad, you shouldn't give your word knowing that you would not be able to keep it. But if you betray others, there would be still maybe things that you can remedy and you can do for them, that you can help somehow. But if you betray yourself, it triggers a mechanism of self-destruction, of internal self-destruction. And then not only you suffer, but also other people around you, people who you know, people close to you, but also people who are not close to you, say your neighbors and even people you pass on the street, because that vortex of negative energy that a person unleashes by that choice of not being true to themselves and starts in collapsing inwards, that vortex of negative energy starts affecting everything else and infecting everything else. So this is why it's so bad. This is why loyalty is so important. Now, the inquiring mind, a warrior, is an incessant, constant learner. So a warrior is someone who never stops. It's one of the ways of evolving yourself. There is never a point where you can say, okay, so I've learned everything, I've evolved myself, I'm done. And this is why you always should think, okay, so whatever I'm doing, can I do it better? Whatever I'm handling, can I handle it better? If you're presented with a question, let's say, or with a decision to make, always look at different angles. And let's say you find 3 angles how to approach this problem. Always ask yourself, are there more? Are there 5? Can I find 6? And once you put your mind in that mode, once you train your mind to be in that state of constantly asking, how can I do better? Your life improves on so many levels because it's an internal attitude. So you wake up in the morning and you ask yourself, okay, so I've got another day of life. What can I do better today? How can I serve better? How can I develop myself better? And then you will be surprised by how your mind, because our mind obeys us, it just carries out our orders. And you would be surprised how the mind goes, oh, actually, you know what? You could improve on this, on that, and say, okay, how can I meditate better? How can I get better results? So if you start asking those questions, your mind will start giving you answers. And then you will have a massive improvement on whatever you're doing every day. And this is the attitude you really, really need. So, non-attachment. You control the world, your world, I mean, and you don't allow it to control you. Non-attachment is about being true to yourself. Again, see, it comes back to loyalty, to staying true to your inner core, to what really matters. Because if you become attached to the things in the outer world, or even to emotions, or to other people, or to whatever else, the thing with the outer world is that anything out there can be taken away from you. And at any time. So you never know. And this is why if you attach your self-worth or happiness or anything else that matters to you, your identity, some people attach identity to what they own or to the people they're with, for example. And so if that is taken away from them, their identity crumbles and their life crumbles. Now, non-attachment is not about indifference. It's about being grateful and appreciative of things that come your way. They can be good things or they can be things that you need to learn from. In either case, you should be grateful because we are treating every day as our training ground. And so it's about doing something with the right intentions. When you do something, let's say you help someone, or let's say you contribute something, you never have the expectation of that thing working out a certain way. And this actually is this little thing really drops people because, especially with our tribe, when, say, you know so much more than other people, which you shortly are going to, you're going to know so much more. And so, say you meet someone and you see they're struggling, and of course, you want to help. It's a natural feeling. You want to help. And so, let's say you spent an hour with them or 2 hours explaining everything and really going through the things that would help them and telling them what they should do, and all of that, really putting your heart, your energy into it. And so that person notes, and you meet them a week later or 2 weeks later, and you discover that they have not implemented one thing from what you said. So you've just spent so much energy, so much time, so much, heart and love and everything. And you discover that that person just, it didn't go through. They did not implement anything. And for many people who are attached to the results, that is quite devastating. It can be really heartbreaking. They can get angry with that person and annoyed and disillusioned, disappointed. All those emotions, very negative, destructive emotions come up. So, to avoid feeling that way, every time that you decide to do something, you should be doing it not because you want to influence someone in a certain way, but because this is an expression of who you are. You're doing something because this is, let's say, this is how you roll. That you are enjoying the process. You are enjoying, let's say, sharing your presence with someone with no expectations. So if that person changes as a result of your interaction, great. If they don't, you still did what you wanted to do, namely to share your light with them. So you've accomplished that goal of sharing your presence. So in either case, you got what you wanted from this. And from everything else that you do in life, again, if it doesn't, say, work out the way that you wanted to, and mind you, sometimes it's actually better for you if it doesn't, I think you can think of many examples where you were like, thank goodness it didn't work out. So, when doing something, when going through life, non attachment is very important, but also what it allows you to do. Non attachment means that you're aware of the fact that everything is impermanent, that everything may disappear at one point. It may be replaced with something better. It's not, I'm not talking about it in the overtones of like gloom and doom. You may have something taken away from you to be replaced with something much better, but something else, something new. And so that thing would be no more, whatever that was. And the point of that is being able to enjoy what you've got in that moment with no fake modesty, because many, especially many religions, go like, oh, but you really have to force yourself to enjoy what you've got. You know what I mean? You have to be happy with what you've got. And if the person goes, but I'm not happy, I want something else, and they're like, nope, you must. You have to force yourself to be happy. And it creates an internal conflict, because if a person is not happy, they're not happy. So it actually makes them feel worse. So non-attachment means that you know that everything flows, everything comes and goes, and there may be a day when whatever you have right now may be no longer there. So what I like doing is I like looking at certain things from the perspective of future memories. What I mean by that is that, say you're sitting in a cafe with your best friend or with your best friends, and you're having an amazing time. What usually happens in that moment, and it's also connected with mindfulness, what happens in that moment, you kind of fall asleep. So while you're talking to those people, you're actually not fully present. You half thinking something else, half talking to them, half looking through the window. So, you know what I mean? You know, this
Mm.
state of mind, right? Because you're lost in that moment, you're just having a nice time. So, a good practice to do is to imagine stepping out of that moment and into the future, let's say 10 years from that moment. And so, imagine that 10 years has passed. Everything changed, or many things changed. You know, maybe you're not even friends with some of those people anymore. Maybe they moved or drifted away. Maybe that cafe got closed and, you know, an estate agent opened in that bar. Maybe you just moved yourself to a different city and you never got to see those people ever again. So, in either case, that 10 years from that moment, you're sitting somewhere and you're thinking back to that moment when you were so happy, enjoying yourself with friends. And as you close your eyes, you imagine stepping fully into that moment when you were sitting there, a 10 years younger you, sitting there laughing with them,
Mm.
sharing a coffee and the chat. And when you do that, in that moment, you become super tuned in. Can you see the power of it? So this is how you can use this moment when you think, oh, I'm not really, even it works also when you think, oh, I'm not really enjoying my day.
Mm.
Again, bring yourself 10 years from now, you're 10 years older, the world is different, and step back into that day of you from 10 years ago and look with those different eyes at
Mm.
everything that surrounds you. And I guarantee you will feel very different. Using future memories allows you to be more mindful, but also cultivate that non attachment because it comes to the forefront of your mind. You know, it becomes really, really clear. Now, discernment is a very important feature for any warrior in spirit because discernment means that you are analyzing things, that you don't take things for the face value. And it has to do with inquiring mind as you see they are on the same level,
Mm.
but it's your mind used differently because in our world right now, you know, it's pretty much a battlefield. So many things are not what they appear. You know, there is that old movie with a guy who found glasses of truth, and every time he put their glasses on, he saw exactly what those glossy things were saying on the surface, but on a deeper level. So he saw the truth behind all those lies and masks. And this is everyone's task. I mean, everyone who does our work and who's part of our tribe, we need to develop those glasses of truth for ourselves so you don't take things for the face value. Words, people, situations, no matter what, you
Mm.
always strive to look what is behind that glossy mask. And
Mm.
sometimes not glossy because, you know, sometimes ugly things can be actually good, and sometimes really sweet and glamorous things can be really bad because quite often the shadow masquerades as fake light. So it presents itself as something good. And we will be talking about it when we talk about egregores. How
Mm.
essentially they're like cults, but they are on the energy level.
Mm.
So they suck people's minds right in and just devour. But on the surface, they appear as good things. They seem all good and plausible and, you know, helping others and all of that. But because most people don't look under the mask to see that demonic face, they buy that pretty face because
Mm.
they think it's real. Now, for a warrior in spirit, for an Ariya warrior, it's a very dangerous mistake to make because the more power you wield, the more of a desirable target you will become. And so there will be more and more attempts to pull you to the dark side naturally, okay? Because
Mm.
you will be a more prized possession, so to speak, a more prized target for
Mm.
them. So it's not to intimidate you because he will have the tools to deal with it. I'm just saying that this is what's going to happen because your value will increase in this war between the light and the shadow. So the shadow will be like, oh my God, I want someone like that amongst our ranks. So this is why discernment is super, super important. And of course, self-control. Again, you can see that self-control and loyalty are on the same level. So loyalty to yourself also fuels your self-control. Because when you feel that, oh, I may treat myself, I may sleep, I may, just do it once, ask yourself whether that is consistent with your truth. And what you will notice that if the answer is no, if your personal dignity is strong, then your mind will actually block that attitude or that temptation automatically. So in most people, they have to struggle with self-control. They have to be like, oh, I'm using so much power to control myself. And when they're tired, for example, that self-control sleeps. Or when they're sad, say people who are dieting or want to have nice figure or a strong body, suddenly if they're depressed, if they're tired, they sleep, they start overeating, they say lose control. But this happens because they don't have these other things in place. They don't have a personal dignity in place enough, and they don't have that truth, that loyalty to themselves. Because what happens to someone who has these things, as I said, as soon as that incongruent attitude or thought or desire comes up, you're actually using the inherent way the mind is built. And that is the mind always strives to keep things within itself congruent. You see what I mean? If you have one belief, the mind will make sure that everything else falls into the same line. This is how, for example, a confirmation bias works. So you've got a belief, and then everything else falls into the same basket. So you are using that mechanism within your very own mind to your advantage now. Because if this is so, like personal dignity and loyalty is so, then everything else has to be so. And so if something comes up, your mind will actually block it by itself. It's like, no, we don't want to do that. There will be an actual resistance towards temptations in your mind. So it will become easier for you not to do it because you would have to fight against yourself to give into temptation, and now it's not tempting anymore. You see what I mean? So this is the power of setting up your mind the right way. It then works for you automatically. You don't need to strive, you don't need to struggle, you don't need to be scared of you sleeping, because so many people, when they start striving towards something and they discipline themselves, they try to develop self-control, they actually dig down, and you may relate to that as well. Earlier on your journey, when you were striving towards something, you set yourself some nice goal, but at the same time, there was always that constant fear in the background that you won't make it. Like something may happen that would knock you off that path and you wouldn't be able to sustain it. And there is that constant anxiety at the back of the mind going, well, I'm good now, but what about tomorrow? What about a week from now? So setting up your mind the right way actually cures that anxiety, because as I said, your mind would not even allow certain attitudes because your mind will automatically cancel them out. So that's the beauty of it. And always ask yourself why. Always ask yourself what matters to you most. And you will notice how whatever bad attitudes come up, they just fall flat. Obviously, the way you express yourself is completely up to you. So the way you express those virtues, the way you grow them, there is no one size fits all. It's your unique path. Lastly, the sevenfold path is essentially the ultimate blueprint that you want to set in the forefront of your mind, something to strive towards. And you can see that it includes things from the noble virtues and from the fundamentals. So it's the ultimate way you want to go through your life. Ideally, if you want to be really, really effective. So always ask yourself whether you're attitude, whether your thinking is aligned with this. I would say the most important one is labeled unity with the light. That is paramount to your development. So at all times, you have to feel that you've got this connection with a power that is greater than yourself. And essentially, it's the power of light, but it doesn't matter how you call it. So it can be anything, it can be God, a deity of some kind, whatever you feel connected with. But essentially, it's just that conscious energy of creation that flows through you and that created you and the entire world. So, for your mission and your evolution to be successful, always have to feel that connection. And if you lose it, become mindful of it and restore it. I'll give you a simple example of how it works. While it may sound a bit metaphysical, like, oh, have this connection with light, it is quite a tangible feeling of being supported by a higher power. And I know you've experienced that in your life. On our path with the work that we're doing, it's actually quite energy extensive, but also it's quite difficult and it's a bit time consuming. And while we've got a little battery within ourselves, that battery is actually not quite enough for this kind of a task, for this kind of a transformation. So, when you're upgrading your mobile phone, it says, well, it's time to upgrade your OS. And then it asks you to plug it into the mains for the duration of the process. It's like that because you need to be plugged in while you're upgrading. So these are your mains from which you can take all the support you need and an enormous amount of energy. Well, as much as your mind allows. But as you're restructuring your mind, more and more energy is flowing into you. So you can take more and keep upgrading. So that's the beauty of it. Integrity is doing the right things for the right reasons, in alignment with your truth and your purpose, so the purposeful living. So you don't live just like some people, they don't live, they vegetate. They just exist, just like leaves floating on the surface of a lake or something. They just drift. There is nothing. And that is the easiest way to become depressed, to become miserable, and to start aging really fast. So having a life with no purpose is one of the most powerful silent killers, actually, in psychology. So this is why. Always remember that even if you haven't figured out how to translate your purpose into the mundane terms yet, so in other words, you don't know what the exact job you want to do, even before you know that, what is important to keep in mind is that your purpose is to become the greatest version of yourself and make a difference in other people's lives by sharing your light with them in whichever way you find suitable. You can then change those ways, you can experiment, but always remember that main goal. And if you always have it in the forefront of your mind, it actually safeguards you from depression and it safeguards you from self-destructive tendencies that many of our tribe are suffering from. So many stars, especially sleeping stars, suffer from depression, suicidal tendencies, and self-destructive tendencies because if you don't let your light flow to the outside, if you keep it inside, in other words, if you are not living your purpose, it activates, as I said, it activates that self-destructive mechanism, those self-destructive tendencies. So always remember to live your purpose because it's good for you. It's basically good for your health, mental and physical. So self-mastery is what we are doing, and respect to yourself and others. So respect is part of you living your truth, part of you having that personal dignity. But at the same time, you have respect for other people's path. And I'm just going to mention it briefly because it's important. So what I mean by that is that you respect other souls' choices, even if you disagree with them. Because quite often, people in our position, and as I said before, very soon you're going to know, you already know more than others, but you're going to know so much more. And then you can look at someone and you can see with all clarity that they are doing the wrong thing. It's going to come around and buy them in the bottom. It's going to bring them pain. It's going to put them in some bad position. And you're trying to stop them out of instinct because you think, oh, I know so much better. And then they don't listen. And you can get annoyed or frustrated. But this is where respect comes in. So you should remember that other people's souls have their innate wisdom and they need certain lessons to go through. They're learning their own way, and it's not up to you to judge how other people should learn and how other people should develop. So even if they go through some experience that are dark and painful, it's probably something that their soul needs to understand some deeper truth. And the fact that you disagree with that, you think it's wrong, doesn't really translate to anything. It's only your preconception, it's only your opinion. And for that soul, those experiences may be something that will really, really elevate them. So you mustn't try and rob them of those experiences by force and forcing them into your ways. So this is a part of respecting others. Lastly, the Ariya code is a good little mantra. It's got only 8 points, 8 very short lines, and it's a good little mantra to repeat to yourself first thing in the morning or whatever you feel that, let's say, your spirit dips a little bit or you're feeling a little bit low, or just to remind yourself who you are and what you're doing. So you can start, the best way to start is to start repeating it out loud, and then later on, just repeat it silently in your mind. Because especially if you say it with full intention, you can notice the power behind those words. So I will read it to you out loud so you can experience how it sounds with the full intention. It's not just the words to say, you have to mean it, all right? So the code goes like this. I'm sworn to the light, the source of life and truth. I act with integrity and honor. Every day is my training ground. I show respect for the free will of others. My life unites both physical and non-physical reality. My tribe are my brothers in spirit. I do not boast. My work speaks for itself. My power is in service to the world. Okay, so this concludes this section of setting up your mind.